Alright, and welcome to this new tutorial on how to implement a data table in Flutterflow using a Supabase backend database, and also how to implement a filtering of this table, this filtering functionality, as well as a sorting functionality in this table. So as you can see, there's this drop down. If I want to filter based on the number, I can select the number column over here, and I can filter for all the numbers which have a 1 and a 5, a 15. So you can see that there's a 1 5 here, there's 1 5 here, and if I want to sort based on the numbers, I can sort based on ascending order as seen by this arrow over here, and I can also sort based on descending order. I can also sort based on their first names, so there's B, E, and G, and I can also sort based on their emails in both ascending and descending order. So that's basically the functionality that we are trying to implement in our Flutterflow mobile apps. Alright, let's get into it. Alright, so I already have something set up in my project over here. First, I have the drop down set up for the user to be able to select the column that they want to filter based on. And for this drop down, I already have all the options for all my columns that I want the user to be able to filter: the first name, number, and email. And then I also have this text field, which allows the user to input their string, their search string that they want to search for. And lastly, I have this data table over here, which shows the ID, first name, number, and email of all the user data. I also have this Supabase table, data table set up in Supabase already. So it's the user data table with the columns of ID, first name, last name, email, their phone number. And if we scroll down here, we can see that to imitate a real life scenario where maybe some data is, you're not able to get some data for some columns for certain users, I've added some random nulls over here as well. This is to simulate real life conditions of what you would find in a real project. So this is basically the only table in Supabase and the table that we will be using. Alright, so now let's get into the filtering part for this first. So if we want to search for something in our Supabase table and reflect it here, we need to make use of an API call. So I already have this search users API call set up here, and it's a method type get, and this is the API URL that I'll be using to filter my Supabase table data. So for the API URL, this first part is dependent on your own Supabase project and is custom to your and unique to your own Supabase. So this part can be found from your Supabase dashboard. You can go to API docs. You can click, so under tables and views, you can click on your own table, and then you can click on bash over here. And you can go all the way down to filtering, and this is where you find the first part. This until the /user data, which is the name of my table. This is where you find the first part of this API URL right over here. It's the same one. So then this next part, the user data question mark, this represents the name of your Supabase table. So in my case, my table is called user data, so it's the exact same name. And this is a variable, which is the column name variable. So this is the column that we want to search and filter based on, and this is here under variables, column name, and it's a string. So this is the one that we want. This is the column in our Supabase table that we want to filter based on. And then this is I like dot and asterisk, and then this search string is another variable, as you can see right over here, and this search string is what the user will input into our text field, into the text field over here. We'll pass that into the search string variable of the API call, and this will filter to see if any of the column any of the values of rows under this column is similar or contains this search string over here. And then this end select equal asterisk over here. This just means to select the entire row. So for this API call, you need to define the variables of search string, which is of type string and is not a list, and this column name as well, which is also of type string. And for the default value, I just put the column of first name, which represents this first name column over here. And for the headers as well, you also need headers for your API call. And for these headers, if you do not already know, you can also find them under API docs under your Supabase dashboard over here. And you once again go to under table and views, go to user data, click on bash again, and then under this project API key, instead of hide, you'll just go to this one over here, the public key. Scroll down once again to the filtering, and you can see you can copy this API key, excluding the double open and close quotation marks over here. So copy this API key and then paste it in one of the headers. And then you also copy this authorization over here and then paste it as the other header over here. So that's how you create this API call. So once you have created this exactly, you can go to response and text. You can try giving it a value. For example, the search string can be AL, and then the column name, I can just put it to first name. So we're searching the first name column for any occurrences of AL in the row, in any of the rows. So we can test the API call. And you can see it returns us some results of the users. For example, Bald over here, the first name, there's an AL inside. For Alan, there's an AL, and Alastair, there's an AL as well. See, AL over here. So this filtering works. And for the purposes of this video, we also want to pass our JSON over here, our results over here, as a data type. So we can toggle this on, and then we also have to create a data type. So we have to go to this left hand side column, and under this data type, we click on it. And you can see I've already created a user data type with all the fields that correspond to my table columns over here in my user data column in Supabase. So you can see ID, first name, last name, email, and number. And you can see ID, first name, last name, email, and number over here. And the data types also correspond to the column types as well. So int and the rest are text, and int for ID and the rest are strings. So in case you don't know how to create a data type, it's very simple. You just press this plus icon, you give it a name. For example, user data 2. You press create, and then you can just add the fields over here. So the first field is ID, then you can change the data type to integer, and you can just leave this as list false because it's not a list. So that's how you create a data type. So you can just copy this user data or create the data type according to the columns in your own Supabase table. So I'll just delete this because we don't need that anymore. Alright, so once we have this data type, we can go back to our API call, and then under response and text, we can pass the data type, and the data type will be our created data type, the user data. And as for the isList, we want to check this toggle on because we are returning, well, there are chances that we will return multiple user rows, so we want it to be passed as a list. So we can just scroll down and then click save. Alright, so that's it for our search users API call. And now we can go back to our main widget tree. Okay, so now let's implement our search API call into our text field as well as the drop down over here. So we can click on the text field, and what we want to do is whenever the user changes or types in something new in the text field, we want to call the API call to filter the Supabase table and get the new data. So to do that, we just click on the text field, select it, go on the actions flow editor, open it, and we can add an action on change for the on change event, because we want to update it whenever the user changes something in the text field. So for this, just search API, and then you can see here we can click on API call action. Oops, sorry. So for the group or call name, we just select our search users API call that we just created, and we can set variables. So this is where we will pass the variables that we just defined into our API call. So for the search string will be under widget state, it will be the text field where they can search for the value in the table. We add another variable, and the second variable will be the column name. So this column name will be under the drop down that the user can select. So it's also under widget state, and you can see there's this drop down over here. Alright, so now that we have called the API, we want to store the result. We want to store this action output variable inside a page state so that we can load it in our data table later. So to do that, we have to create a page state first. To create a page state, go onto your main page and then click on this icon over here on the right, state management. And you can see I've already created one, but let's just remove this for now. And we can add a new page state variable. So we can just name it user data rows. As for the type, you want it to be of type data type, and we also want to check the isList to true. So for the type, it will be the user data data type that we just created. Just click on confirm to save it. We can go back to our text field, and now we can store whatever result that we get from this API call into our page state. So we can add an action, and we can search for state, and then we want to update the page state. We want to set the user data rows variable that we just created, the set value, and you want to set the value to our action output and this API result that we just got from over here. For this, we want to set it as a data type, and for this we can just leave it as no further changes, so we can confirm. Alright, so now what we have achieved is we allow the users to search for and filter for a value, and filter any column that they choose for a value based with these text field and drop down elements. So now what we are missing is we are missing the updating of this data table over here, because right now it's still a plain text over here that is not responsive and not updated. So we have already stored our data that is returned from the API call from this into our page state. So now all that we have to do is to click on the data table and click over here on this generate dynamic children. And we can set the value to the one that we stored in our page state, this user data rows over here. And we don't need any further changes. We can just say no further changes. And we can save this. Alright, so under this column, for this text of edit column 1, we can just change the text to the user data table row item. So user data table row item, we can search for data structure field, select this one, and for under the data structure field for the user data, we want to select ID since this is the ID column. So select that, and we can put a default variable of 0. So just confirm, and now it should be linked up. For these remaining columns, we also do the same thing. Select the text, select user data table row item. Under available options, select data structure field, and under the field, we'll just do the same one under this column over here. So it will be first name, default variable of a space. So do the same thing for the number and email as well. Alright, so now that we have all this UI linked up to our data, we can try reloading the test mode and see if it appears in the UI and updates the UI now. Alright, so we are filtering under the first name column, and we can search for AL. And you can see that we have successfully filtered. So there's Ball AL, Michael AL, Alan AL, Alastair AL. Alright, so our functionality, the basic functionality for our database, our data table has been achieved. But now, what if we want to sort the rows based on, for example, the ID? I want it to be in ascending order or descending order. Or first name, I want it to be start with A first, then all the way to Z. Or what about if I want to sort by the email or their number as well? So to do this, we have to implement our own custom function. Yes, that's right. I know this is a no-code tutorial, but sometimes you need to be able to implement higher order functions. Alright, so in this left-hand side menu, we have to go to the custom code section. And you can see I've already implemented the function that we need to do. And I will be putting this into the description, so no worries. But I will be explaining the function over here right now. So I'll start from scratch. Alright, so to create our own custom function, we can go to this add button over here, and we can click on function. We can give our function a name. For example, data table sort 2. And then for this return value on the right side over here, we want the return value to be of type data type. And this data type will be the data type of user data that we just created. We want it to be a list. And then we also have to define some arguments over here. So click on add. The first argument will be the user data. And this data type will also be of type data type, and it will be the user data. So it will also be a list, and we don't want it to be nullable. So we add more arguments. The second argument that we want to add will be the index. And we want this to be of type integer. We don't want it to be nullable as well. And now we have to add one last argument. This argument is whether it's ascending or not. So this will be a boolean, a type boolean, and it's also not nullable. Right, so that's all the arguments done. Now you can go under this within this modify code only, below and above this line. So in between that, you can copy and paste the code that I will link in the description below of the video below. Oops, for this argument, it will be users, because this is what I've used over here. And it looks like this ascending is spelled wrongly, so I'll change that. Alright, so if you followed and copy and pasted the code over here, as well as successfully copy this return value as well as defining the arguments properly, you should be able to save the function. and there should be no red squiggly lines anywhere in your code. So let me just give you a short and brief explanation of how the code works. So for this, we defined the case. So for 0, if it's 0, it means it's the ID column, so sort the ID column. If it's a 1, we are sorting for the first name column, since there's first name over here. If it's a 2, we are sorting under the number column, so there's this number over here. And if it's a 3, we are sorting for the email column. So this piece of code over here, the email, number, first name, and ID, it has to match your data table, the ones in your data table as well. So what does this mean? So we are sorting the row, we are sorting the column, we're sorting the column, and if this ascending boolean, if it is true, if ascending is true, then we're sorting by ascending order. Else, if ascending is false, then we're sorting by descending order. So that's basically just how it works. There's the syntax of code. You don't really have to go into it if you don't want to learn code, but it would be good to learn Dart, or Dart, which is the language that Flutter is based on. So in order to understand the code, you have to learn Dart. And if you do, that's good. You'll be able to understand this code. It's pretty simple once you have a good grasp of Dart. And then in the end, we'll just return the users that we have modified over here and sorted. Alright, so this custom function is done. I'll just delete this because there's no use for it. Alright, so now we can go back to our main UI over here. And now, in order to add the sorting function onto our data table, we have to select our data table and we have to add a new action. Oops, why is there an issue over here? Oh yeah, and also if you see an error because of the custom function, don't worry, you just need to click on the error and it will just check the custom function for you. Just Flutterflow, it will raise an error every time you create a new custom function but you don't check the custom function. So that's just basically its preventive measures. So once it takes some time to check the function, you should see that the error is gone. So we can go back to our main UI in our Flutterflow dashboard over here. We can select the data table, and with the data table selected, we can open the action flow editor. And now you can see that there are some events over here. What the event that we want is the onsort change event. So we click on the onsort change event and we add an action. And now what we want to do is to update our state one more time. So we can search state and we want to update the page state. And you want to update this user data rows page state variable that we created. So the update type will be set value and the value to set. Now it will be, you can scroll down and it will be under custom functions. So it will be under this custom functions. And you want to select the new function that we implemented ourselves. So now we have to pass in some function arguments for this user's data variable. We want to pass in our page state variable, so the user data row under page state. And no further changes, we just confirm. For the index, it will be under the data table. And you can see that there's this sorted column index, so we just select that. And finally, for the ascending, we will just go to data table once more, and there's this is ascending boolean, we just select that. And now we can hit confirm, and we'll rebuild the current page or so whenever it updates. Alright, so that's basically it for the whole functionality. We can go into test mode one last time and see if our newly created function of sorting the data table works in our app. Right, I'll see you when the test mode loads up. Alright, so test mode has just loaded up. We can try searching our data table. So we can search for ALA. Oops. Search for ALA. And you can see that we have two results over here. Oops, there was one thing I forgot to do, and that is to go to each table data table header. And for this, there's this sortable toggle over here. We have to set each of this data table header toggle to true. So we have to set the sortable to true. So go to each data table header in your table and set it to true. And there's one last one over here. So this is important, because if sortable is selected to false, it won't reflect, and it won't give you this sorting functionality in your data table in Flutter. And let's just try searching again. And you can see that we have some results over here. If I want to sort by the first name, I can click on this first name column over here. And you can see it's sorting in ascending order based on the first name now. If I want to sort based on descending order, I can just click it again, and you can see there's this down arrow, and now it's sorting in descending order. Let's say I want to sort back on ID again, based on ID. I can just click on this ID, and now you can see it's sorting based on descending order. Let's say I want to sort based on their emails. So I can click this, and you can see that the now values are sorted first, and then we have this other values over here as well. So we can just try to go to other pages as well, and you can see sort again, and you can see that the other pages are updated as well. Let's just try filtering under a different column. Let's just try the number. You can get all the numbers that have 1 and 2. So as you can see, these numbers are not sorted yet, so I just want to sort based on their numbers in ascending order. So I can click on this, and you can see it's based on ascending order, based on the first 3 numbers over here. Alright, so that's basically it. Thank you for watching. Although this tutorial is quite long, but I hope that it will be helpful for many of you, and I hope that you have benefited from this tutorial that I have created for data tables in Flutterflow, and this sorting function as well.